Commencing the committee meeting shortly, but there was one announcement. You urge your attention for observers. I would like you to be silent because you will not be required to give comments or so. So please keep silence for observers. Thank you very much. The chair speaks. And now we would like to commence the National Diet of Japan Fukushima Nuclear Accident Independent Investigation Committee, the 13th meeting from now. As you know, as an unsworn witness, we would like to start directly the hearing of the witness. Today we have as witness is former Vice Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Mr. Matsunaga, Kazuo Matsunaga is today's unsworn witness. As shown in this overhead, Mr. Matsunaga actually joined the METI and developed his career. And in 2001, he became the Director General of Natural Resources Field Department of a Agency of Natural Resources, and from 2004 he became the Director General of NISA. After that, he serves Deputy Vice Minister for Policy Coordination and the Deputy Vice Minister, Administrative Secretariat, and became Director General of the Economic Industry Policy Bureau, and until 2011, August, since 2010, he served as Vice Minister for Economy and Trade and Industry. Thank you for coming. Around the time of Fukushima accident, at NISA, as well as a person who worked for a person in charge of the NISA as well as Agency for Natural Resources, he actually held a very important position. So with no further ado, we would like to go directly to a question. Do you have anything to say, sir? Thank you very much for your introduction. My name is Matsunaga. Last year, until August, as been introduced by Chair, I serve as Vice Minister of Economy and Trade and Industry. Last year, we had a very major serious accident at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant station, and quite a lot of people were damaged and they have to evacuate. And still, at present time, a lot of people have to live in a very difficult situations. Based upon this fact, as Mr. Chairman mentioned, around the time I served as the top of the administrative side of METI, I felt very sorry about that situation. And today, I would like to make a statement to the best I can, so I really hope that that'll be informative. Thank you. And I would like to invite Jikocho Tanaka to raise questions with respect to the nuclear power. My name is Tanaka. Nice to see you, sir. Before March the 11th, at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station, I just raised questions with respect to the strength or durability of the nuclear power plant prior to March the 11th. To Mr. Matsunaga, in September 2006, the Safety Commission designed, they revised the safety guideline, so to say, was formulated. And at the time, you were the head of NISA, and you were involved in that formulation of the new guideline. Am I right? In understanding way. The witness speaks. At the time, Nuclear Safety Commission, as you said, was formulating the revision as to the guideline, and I was aware of that at the time. And the NISA was ready, if invited, to take part. But under the observer status, some people from NISA had been participating in that process, as I remember. In terms of the tsunami, in the old guideline, were there any provisions of the tsunami in the old guideline? Well, at this moment, I'm not aware of that. Probably there were no provisions in the old guideline on the tsunami. One of the features of the revised new guideline is that there was some provisions on tsunami. There's item 8. This is considerations with respect to the accompanying phenomena with the earthquake. And parenthesis 2, it says that although it's very rare, there is a possibility that there'll be occurrence of tsunami, and there might be some serious effect on the safety functions of the facility. That's what this paragraph says. There are 4 sentences on this overhead slide. Well, you may say that number of lines is not relevant, but it was written in the guideline, 2 sentences with 2 letters. This was a small provision, only described in 2 lines in the revised guideline. Do you have any opinion on this description? Around that time, I was a deputy head of NISA and also the chair or Director General of NISA. I served in those capacities for 3 years. In hindsight, in this preparations of revised guideline, I unfortunately do not have any recollection that I was reported that there were good discussions on tsunami. You were not reported, are you saying? I don't remember. I do not recall that I was reported. Around that time in the world, in 2004, there was an earthquake at Banda Aceh of Sumatra. There was a big earthquake, and there was several surges of tsunami of height of 10 meters on average took place 2 years prior to that date. Don't you know that what discussions evolved with respect to Banda Aceh? Well, there was a big earthquake in Sumatra in 2004. Yes, I do remember that. And the fact that tsunami took in Banda Aceh and deliberations on the revised guideline, the relation between the two were not really clearly understood in my mind at that time. Well, it's a nuclear safety, atomic safety commission exercise, but I think NISA should have been interested in the formulation process. Were there any discussions in NISA around the time on the sufficiency of discussion conducted in the commission as to the revised guideline? Well, there might have been some discussions in NISA, but I myself was not reported about the discussions within NISA. You mean the discussion within NISA? You were not reported. Yes, I think I was not reported. If I may supplement what I just mentioned, in hindsight, at the time, it was summertime in 2004 that I became the DG of NASA, and August in 2004, in Bihama number 3, there was a serious accident within the jurisdiction of Kazuo Electric, and 5 people lost their lives. At the time, most of my work as a DG of NISA was the handling of that accident at the Bihama nuclear reactor number 3. And until the springtime, I think most of my work were geared to this particular accident, as I recall. Yes, I understood what I meant to say. Talking on the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, and prior to March the 11th, there was a strong interest on the seismic capability of that nuclear power station, including Fukushima. There are 54 nuclear units in Japan. And actually, there were three periods of the construction of those reactors in terms of anti-seismic capability. First is September 2006. The first guideline was issued and decided on September 2006. And since that time, that guideline was applied. Were there any new reactors this guideline was applied? Formulated in September 2006. I don't know. When it comes to a new guideline, there's no really the nuclear reactors operating under the new guideline. It is still the process, a back check process. No, I'm not talking a back check. There are no reactors where the new, actually, the guidelines were applied in Japan. So this new guideline was not really applied to any reactor at all in terms of application for that new guideline from the design. Well, we talk about 54 nuclear reactors in Japan. These were under the old guidelines, or even the guideline even before decided on July 1981. As you see, in July 1981, there was an old and first anti-seismic capability guideline was decided, which is quite surprising. In 1966, Fukushima Daiichi construction was applied for, but actually for 15 years, there were no revised guidelines, and there are no actually updated anti-seismic assessment guideline, even in the earthquake-prone Japan. So there are three periods as such. And Fukushima Daiichi, as you see, in December 1972, the number 6 unit of the Fukushima Daiichi was applied for, actually, and the permitted in terms of installation. So in 1972, 9 years before the old guideline was formulated, all the 6 reactor units of Fukushima were actually designed long before the old guideline was published. And maximum acceleration was 265 gal, whereas old guidelines describe 370 gal, and in new revised guidelines, 600 gal. So when the reactor was designed based upon 265, whether that reactor could withstand 600 gal, do you think that the reactor could withstand 600 gal? In terms of the anti-seismic capability of the facility, is over 265 gal, but whether the units withstand 600 gal or not, I think we have to do the thorough back check, I think. How is the back check currently? It's not completed yet, as I'm aware of.
Well, that's because there's been an explosion and there's a nuclear power plant that's not usable. But do you have the willingness to do this vis-a-vis that plant? Well, I also experienced this myself. Yes, I understand. So therefore, that government policy is something that I'm not in the position currently to answer to this. I'm someone who is no longer in that position, but as someone outside of the government now, I feel that this back check should be done as soon as possible. You did say that this ought to be done as soon as possible. NISA decided this in 2006 and said that the back check needed to be done, and this was required at that point. Is that correct? At that time, I was not in my position in the past, so I do not understand how it was at that time. Yes, I understand, but since then, nothing was done. There was the interim report that was put out. Let's put that aside for now. The reason why things are not becoming clear, we find ourselves in the current situation where things aren't clear. Well, with regard to the history of that, recently, in various ways, there's been points that have been pointed out, and we've come to an understanding about that. So therefore, with regard to this anti-seismic capability, we ought to do this as soon as possible as far as the back check is concerned. That's how I understand it. Yes. Well, with regard to the stress test, I'd like to ask a few questions about that. As far as the stress tests are concerned, witness Matsunaga, what sort of relationship do you have with these stress tests? What sort of engagements did you have with that? As far as the stress tests are concerned, the government policy was issued regarding stress tests, I believe, the beginning of July. And at that time, I was vice minister, so therefore, as far as that policy was concerned, the three concerned ministers decided upon this in a new way. And so I did understand that there was this decision that was reached. Well, do you remember whom it was that raised this in the first place? Well, that's something that I don't really know. As you are well aware, as far as Japan is concerned, when you think about the 60s and the 70s, we have been imitating the United States, or rather learning from the United States, whether it be design, manufacture, inspection, maintenance. All the ways of doing this came from the United States. And with the United States, we had been imitating what had been done, and we had the same sort of structures in place. That's how I understand it. But with regard to the stress tests, this is very European in notion. At that time, what sort of attitude did the United States have with regard to those stress tests? I'm very sorry, I'm not aware of that. Well, what about currently then? As far as stress tests in the United States are concerned, I've really not heard very much about that. Well, basically speaking, they do not do stress tests in the United States. And you don't know the reasons as to why that is the case then. That's correct. At that time, did you have a discussion about this within NISA? As far as that matter is concerned, I haven't received a report on that. To conduct the stress test, this was a determination that was made on the ministerial level, and at that time, for that purpose, we need to be able to respond in an appropriate manner. I do believe that's what we thought, and within NISA and the activities that we needed to conduct, we needed to make sure these were conducted swiftly. Well, we've all of a sudden heard about stress tests, and it seems quite curious that this had happened. So you really don't know the reason or the reasons as to why this is the case. I don't know. Is it the same for everyone at NISA? Well, at that time, within NISA, there hadn't been any deliberations regarding that, as far as I can recall. I understand. Well then, with regard to the situation in the world, and the United States way of doing things, this was not really used as a point of reference, but rather you all of a sudden jumped to the European way of doing things at that time. Currently, Mr. Tanaka, as you had rightly pointed out, there had been a historical engagement with the United States, as you had pointed out, and with regard to the organizations around the world that regulate, we, of course, have a scheme to conduct our discussions. And twice a year, we have the INDA meetings that we participate in. And the United States way of thinking is, of course, very important. But the way Europeans think about assuring safety of nuclear agency and also discussions with top-level individuals in the European regulating authorities, we did conduct these as well. So just because the stress test is something that hails from Europe, to say that it would not be suitable for Japan is not an awareness that we have. There is 5015, which is a standard that exists, and this was something that the United States ASA ME had put out. And this puts together the United States way of doing things. When you think about the consistency of the activities that need to be conducted, perhaps the stress test doesn't fit within that scheme. Perhaps what you say is true, Mr. Tanaka. However, at that time, it was not necessarily that we had that kind of awareness as we looked upon this. So therefore, these matters were really not issues that were raised within NISA at that time. Is that correct? I understand. Just one last thing I'd like to ask Mr. Matsunaga, if I may. When you were the head of NISA, there was the big tsunami that had assaulted Southeast Asia. And the Japanese people, of course, could have thought about how tsunamis would assault us as well. And at that time, whether or not the head of NISA had discussed this, you can't remember whether this was discussed at all? I can't imagine that. As far as my recollection is concerned, with regard to the Indian Ocean side, I forget the name of it, but there was a nuclear power plant there, and there was a tsunami that had occurred, and trouble had arisen as a result of that. And what had happened at that time? To specifically investigate that, we had a meeting that was held. And we said that we needed to collect the necessary information in order to investigate this further. I do recall that this was discussed. I was wondering if, as Director General, you thought that maybe nothing needed to be done, or perhaps you gave such guidance that you needed to do that. I do recollect that we needed to exercise that kind of effort. I'm sure that there are various points you will point out, but as far as my recollection is concerned, the Mihama Unit 3 accident and how to deal with that was taking up most of our considerations. And at that time, as NISA, we had submitted 2 bills to the National Diet, so we were very busy with those matters. But if you hear tsunami, wherever it may occur, you might think immediately Japan. Well, I do understand that you were very busy with various things. As for the stress test, you were the top person within the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. I can't imagine that such a thing would have been ordered without knowing what it was about. Why is it a stress test that's necessary? Whether it be the minister decides that or the prime minister decides that, you can't say you don't know anything about that. What do you think? As Mr. Tanaka had mentioned earlier, of course, I forget when it was, from about June, there were going to be movements with regard to the stress test in Europe, I did understand, between May to June. So therefore, I don't think that had suddenly taken place. Well, I'm sure that there were various circumstances that existed, but I'm sure that you were aware of these things. You might panic all of a sudden and say, what is that? Because you were the person responsible at that time. Were you not? Well, with regard to the conducting of the stress tests, I didn't have very much of a knowledge about that at that time. So from the concerned individuals, I do believe that I had received an explanation as to what it was. And with regard to the stress tests and the conducting of those and the verification of those, that's something that needed to be done. That's how I understood it. There might be other questions perhaps that might be asked, but we'd like to have maybe some other members ask a question. Mr. Sakurai? Yes, I'm Sakurai. With regard to the role that you had fulfilled, Vice Minister, I'd like to ask about that, if I may. Here we have the organizational chart before us. It's a very simple one. Overall, would this be correct in explaining your organization? And then we have the Vice Minister under the parliamentary Vice Ministers. Well, with regard to yourself, as far as Vice Minister, what sort of relationship did you have with the other parts of the organization? Not with the minister, but below you, with the other parts of the organization. I'm the head of the administrative section. So, of course, aside from our section, I've dealt with the other agencies. And I oversaw the administrative activities overall. Here we have, of course, the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy and NISA, which is the Nuclear and Industrial Safety Agency. What sort of relationship do these two have with one another, and what sort of roles do they each fulfill? As far as the Agency for Natural Resource and Energy is concerned, I do believe that it oversees natural resources and energy. And then you have NISA, of course, which deals with regulating nuclear energy. What sort of relationship do these two have with the organization portions above? I'm not sure whether I understand your question. But as far as the two are concerned, they each have their distinct roles that they fulfill. And they are both very important organizations that fulfill their important roles. As far as this agency for natural resource and energy and the NISA are concerned, sometimes you might not agree with one another. Then what would be done? Well, as far as the way in which these two exist, of course, if there is such a disagreement that should arise, then we would receive consultations and vice versa. We are limited in time, but I'd like to ask about some specific things with regard to 311. Well, with regard to this kind of notification that had taken place, how do you understand this notification that had taken place? Well, on the 11th of March, I believe it was 4:30 or after 5, perhaps, as far as METI was concerned, we received, well, we actually had the first nuclear energy countermeasures meeting that was held and the Prime Minister and the ministers participated in that, and the individuals from NISA participated in this, and said that there was such a notification warning, a notification that was given. Well, then what did you do after that in your capacity as Vice Minister? I do believe that very quickly, as far as the countermeasures headquarters, we decided that we would need to take some sort of action. And so the minister and Mr. Terasaka went immediately to the Prime Minister's residence. And we also had the Vice Minister go to the site.
So my role was from the administration side was to support those range of activities in more specific way. When the minister and DJ went there, the Prime Minister should issue the emergency notice, and you were supporting that. Am I right in understanding that way? Yes. So, Vice Minister, you did not accompany their visit. For declaration of emergency situations, what explanation did you get, was given to Prime Minister, and were you reported on this one? No. When the emergency situation was declared, until that time you were just waiting until the emergency situations was declared. Well, through various routes, various reports came to me, but as I recall what happened that time, around that time, at night on March 11, Senior Vice Minister Ikeda couldn't really reach the site so easily, so I myself call the head of the police agency and Ministry of Defense for their support. As you recall, for emergency situation declaration, Mr. Kaeda visited Prime Minister official residence. Until such declaration made, there was a long lead time. It took a long time. So what was your perception of the lead time until the declaration was made? Around that time, I didn't really think that it took a long time because they're very difficult to communicate among another. Therefore, the reporting was also difficult. The nuclear power countermeasure headquarters, in terms of its function, was not really assuming that a report to be made to me in that way. So I must have did something to track the situations, but more or less we actually trust what the headquarters was doing. In terms of the decision of the evacuation zone, were you consulted or reported as to the decisions of the demarcation of the evacuation zone? Well, exposed after the fact, the decisions on the evacuation zone was, I think, reported to me because there was some document on the desk. But there was a report that decision was made to the evacuation zones. And as you know, after that, the zone was extended to from 10 to 20 kilometers. But in that extension decision, were you reported or were you consulted before they decided on the extension? But was it the same as the initial decision after the fact, were you reported, in other words? I think the latter held too. After they decided, I think I was reported, as I recall. Well, as Vice Minister Nisa and METI, when deciding that decision, actually weren't you interested in whether the involvement of the NISA and METI? Well, NISA was supposed to do that, so I thought around that time that the decision would be made by NASA. So I thought that NISA would have done that naturally. Yes. And the seawater injection is another topic, particularly for nuclear reactor 1. On this matter, was there any report and explanation? And if yes, when and how? Okay, well, that I do not have any clear recollection. Well, I gave explanation to Prime Minister, or after the fact, actually, not I, but explanation was given to Prime Minister to acquire his agreement. I think I was reported later. Actually, seawater injection was started, and sometimes in the process, it was about to be suspended, although it was not suspended, but we reported about the process of the seawater injection and a possible interruption. I think I collected information in writing or something to do check. When I checked the images around 1904, the seawater injection started, and the report was given to NISA from the TEPCO. On the other hand, on site at the plant, the security inspector's report says that after 20 o'clock on that day, the report says the seawater injection was started. That's how the report to ERC described. So, as Vice Minister, was there anything about this, the timing of the start of seawater injection? No. In a national diet, questioning, I think the Vice Minister go through the possible answers the Prime Minister can give, could give in the national diet. The answers in the national diet examinations changed from time to time. Are you aware of the differences of the answers given at the national diet by the minister, not Prime Minister, by the minister? Yes, I think there were several cases like that. Of course, that could have been caused partly due to TEPCO, but the answer given by the minister at the national diet is a kind of statements given by the minister to the people of Japan without the thorough investigations, when that those answers vary from time to time with the resulting in various effects on different aspects. How do you recognize that fact? As you said, the correct information should be communicated to the people of Japan as soon as possible. I think that is one of the important mission of the government. So when the information given in the national diet varies from time to time, I think it's not good, and it's the wrong thing to do. Although I separate from whether it's related to that or not, there was the Comelt reference in the press conference. There was a lot of inquiries given to the Prime Minister's official residence, and also the expression or the phrase used at that juncture also changed. How did you perceive that phenomena? Not exactly that time, but later, I think there were some efforts to streamline the way the explanation be given. Do you know when that happened? I don't remember exactly. It's not immediately after. Well, on March 12, is that the kind of was that the discussion taking place on the 12th? I don't remember, but well, 1 or 2 days later, as I recall. What the Prime Minister official residence says, and because of that, statements given by NISA changed or activity on NISA changed. Will you report it, explain about those related events? I did not necessarily recall that NISA activity changed because of the Prime Minister official residence, for example. The loss of core or core meltdown, there were various terminologies used at the time. So those terminology should be somewhat streamlined, and including the NISA's its own opinion. There was a recognition that those use of terminology should be reconsidered and streamlined. Actually, the person in charge of the public relation change around that time, and there are several interpretations of that event. But how do you feel about that, or what's your interpretation? The actually a person at NISA, the was responsible for the public relations, and in general, the person in charge changed so frequently was not really a welcoming situation. And the personal change from one counselor to the other counselor in charge of public relations details, I don't know. Was there any case that Vice Minister, you yourself gave interaction to that effect? Do you recall anything? I do remember. I don't remember exactly when it was, but the one counselor appeared as a new person in charge of public relations. I was heading for I was at the operation center of the Ministry Secretariat because we could watch the broadcasting of a series of TV stations. And I think from my point of view, the public relations vis-a-vis the people of Japan, I thought he was not really doing a good job. So I consulted with the chairman Terasaka at the time about this. Around that time, NISA was short of people, overloaded with work. And we asked the various bureau to send people to NISA. And the counselor from the METI, in charge of the industrial policy, to be sent to NISA for public relations. I remember I told that. So you yourself was not really involved in that. You visited Prime Minister's official residence several times, didn't you? Yes. For what reasons, for what purposes, and where did you go? The first time I remember it was March the 15th, midnight or early morning of the 15th that I visited there. Why did you go there? The situation was really tight and serious at the time. At the off-site center, it was difficult to continue. It was difficult for the center to continue its activities, and it was so reported from NISA and from the site. And I wanted to consult with the minister directly Do you mean that Mr. Kaeda? Yes, Minister, directly. Where did you meet with Mr. Kaeda? And when? It was long after that, in the big room next to the office of the Prime Minister, that I consulted with Mr. Kaeda. What did you talk specifically? In order for the offsite center to be more functional, I just told him that whether the offsite be relocated to become more functional, and I asked him for his decision. And what did he say, Minister say? He said, understood. Let me consider the matter, and I will let you know later. That's what he said. At the time, did you talk with the Prime Minister yourself? No, I didn't meet with the Prime Minister. Not. And Vice Minister, according to some report, talked to the Prime Minister, and there's some reports saying that the Prime Minister says something. No, I didn't meet with the Prime Minister at that time.
May I please? Well, Article 10 and Article 15 was discussed, and then the emergency situation had arisen, so you conducted your preparations and you had your discussions with Mr. Terasaka, who was the Director General of NISA at that time. It was not at the Prime Minister's residence where he was, but he was in his own office because he felt that he was not the appropriate person who should deal with this. You do understand that? Yes, I do understand. And at that time, did you think to yourself, this person is the most appropriate person to deal with this? Shouldn't he be there? Well, I do think that there are various ways of dealing with the situation. Each of the phases of the emergency situation entails the allocation of the necessary personnel. And as far as the NISA head is concerned, that was the judgment that he had made that would be most appropriate, he felt at that time. So I do acknowledge that. You said that because of this emergency situation, it really needs to be dealt with by NISA. Did you say that? Yes. Basically speaking, as far as this is concerned, dealing with it on site is very important. As you move further away from the situation, it becomes more and more indirect what you hear and grasp. So the persons who are on site need to be able to exercise their expertise and knowledge in dealing with the situation. I did not say that it will be left up to NISA, but I did say to Mr. Terasaka, you might not have enough personnel. So if there are personnel that you would need, we would provide for those. But with regard to the PR people, that was what was said. Well, I did consult with the Director General in terms of asking him to please deal with this situation. That is true. I'd like to continue. With regard to the Vice Minister's position, you are there to support the ministers and the Prime Minister. Minister Kaeda went to the Prime Minister's office and residence very many times, but it seems as if the information was not clearly and accurately relayed to the Prime Minister. What did you do in your capacity as Vice Minister to make certain that this would not be the case and that the necessary information would be relayed? As you are well aware, I was within the building and the minister was pretty much in the Prime Minister's residence and office. Sometimes the cell phones would connect and sometimes not. So therefore, sometimes it was difficult to consult with the minister. And the important point when it comes to decision-making, that decision-making is conducted by the Prime Minister's residence and office, and we understood it as such from the very beginning. We needed to support the minister who was at the Prime Minister's residence and office, and we needed to be able to appropriately support the Prime Minister. We dispatched several members of our organization to the Prime Minister's residence and office and conducted a backup effort in terms of communication. As a result, it seems as if very important information was not relayed to the minister. Do you have any thoughts as to why this might have been the case at that time? I do not have an accurate recollection, but with regard to that kind of point, I do understand that it is justifiable that you should say so. However, we did conduct our utmost efforts at that time. It did seem we were not able to conduct the communications necessary at all times. ERC perhaps was not able to function in its utmost manner. The minister was at the Prime Minister's office and residence, and he is the top person at METI, and he needed to make some very important decisions there in his capacity as Minister of METI. I'm asking about results. I'm sure you understood the situation as such, but to what extent was effort being made in order to make certain that you fully supported the minister? I do understand the criticism that it was inadequate in terms of the support that we were able to provide to the minister. However, we wanted to support the minister at all times and wanted to support the persons who were assembled at the Prime Minister's office and residence. As much as possible, we did send the necessary personnel there to make this happen. Do you feel that you were able to support the minister adequately? Yes, I do feel that way. However, there are criticisms that are directed toward us that we were not able to do so adequately, and I do understand that as well. Mr. Sakurai, thank you very much. Next, Mr. Nomura. But before that, please, if I may. It's related to the question that was just asked. I'd just like to ask about your awareness with regard to the issue. As far as NISA is concerned, from IAEA, it's been pointed out that NISA is not independent enough, and the human resources in terms of experts was not adequate. It was not only that organization, but also experts within our country domestically that used to wonder whether NISA was adequately capable. It was only 1 year and 3 months where you fulfilled your role as Vice Minister. But what sort of awareness did you have regarding this? Did you feel that there was an importance to conduct reform in some manner? How did you look at this? Yes. The way in which the nuclear safety organization ought to exist and conduct its activities, as was mentioned by yourself and Mr. Oshima, there were various criticisms that we had received. We felt that we were a parallel organization that existed alongside the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy. However, we did feel that we were independent. And not only did we feel that way, we also knew that we were independent and conducted our activities with that understanding. And I did say this within NISA, and I myself have always kept this at the forefront of my mind as I conducted my daily activities at NISA. However, at that time, this very huge accident did happen. And as far as the administrative body that was in charge of nuclear and industrial safety, we felt that we needed to do the work that we were expected to do. And to that end, it was necessary to have the reforms instituted. Mr. Nomura, please. I'm a member of this commission. My name is Nomura. Nice to meet you. You were overseeing this organization that dealt with nuclear energy issues. Could you please explain to us what sort of damages were sustained and what sort of suffering the people of the area were under? The people of the area needed to evacuate, and it was not only evacuation that took place at one time, but continuous evacuation that was forced upon them. In a way, they've lost their hometowns. A certain period of time, once it transpires, then they might be able to return. And perhaps this thought might make it possible for them to live in their temporary housing. However, it's very difficult to calculate when it might be in the future that they might be able to return. So I do understand it's a very difficult situation. Did you not think of those who were hurt on site? Yes, of course I do think about them. Do you have anything else you'd like to say in terms of apologizing to the people of our country? As far as our nuclear power plants are concerned, they are adequately safe. However, the Fukushima prefecture people, as well as the people on site, have received an explanation that these nuclear power plants are safe. And the reality ended up being something altogether different. So within Japan, domestically, the people who reside near the nuclear power plants in our country, the nuclear power is something that is essential in the lives of the people of our country. So we had rolling blackouts and such, and very many people were very anxious about the situation, and we have troubled them very extensively. And I'd like to apologize from the bottom of my heart for this.
And the planned power blackout is something you mentioned for the stable supply of energy that I think is the mission. And as a former vice minister, that make sure that energy be supplied, I think there should be some official apology for not being able to do that. On top of that, for the affected people, there has been compensation program, and that amount to be required for compensation have to be burdened by the shoulder of individual of the people of Japan. How do you think about this? In terms of the funds for compensation for the affected people, actually for the utility tariff increase would be a means to cover the costs, and that will give the burden to the people. There are many other damages like farmers and industries. Around there are radioactive effect exerted upon the agriculture and also the people who really seek for the security of food or safety of food. I think there are many people you should extend apology. Yes, I agree with that. When it comes to the planned blackout, after the accident took place, if there had been no accident, there wouldn't have been a planned blackout, right? Yes. When it comes to the planned blackout, how and what discussion took place to decide to go ahead with the planned blackout? How were you involved? And the accident took place. And the following day, I think it was Saturday, 12th of March. I do not remember exactly when on that day, but Mr. Hosono approached me that when the situation continued into the future within the jurisdiction of TEPCO, the electricity supply would be in very tight situation. So we have to come up with some countermeasures. And we have to hurriedly start the deliberation on this point. The kind of report was made by Hosono to me. As you said earlier, that is one of the effects or damages of the accident. But the plan, although it's called plan blackout, and because people expect that there will be a blackout in his area, but there was no blackout. The plan was really not precise, and how, for example, the decision was made which area would be subject to blackout and the others not. Of course, the accident itself was serious, but after that, wasn't there any human errors in the operations of the planning of such blackout? Well, I understood what you're trying to say. I fully understood what you meant to say. But that day, 12, was Saturday, and from Monday, we had to really go ahead with the planned blackout. So were we fully prepared for that? Well, in hindsight, we were not fully prepared for that. Around that time, the basis of data provided by TEPCO, as you criticize, as you rightly said, that the sufficiency assessment was not conducted, but we were fighting with the clock to go ahead with the plan blackout. So in that particular context, I think your criticism is correct. Within the government, what ministry and who was the top of the issue related to the planned blackout in Japanese government? Well, on this point, in the cabinet, I don't remember the name itself, but for the purpose of a planned blackout, there was an organization unit formulated for the purpose of planned blackout in the cabinet. Mr. Kaeda was the minister in charge, and the METI was a support of him, and commissioner of the Agency of Natural Resources and Energy was the head of the secretariat. How about yourself? I myself, of course, was not really a member of that organization. The minister was in charge, but the vice minister was not free of the responsibility. No, yes. Well, METI is a ministry to ensure the stable supply of energy, and there was, because of the poor planning, there was a lot of complaints from the people of Japan that there are actual damage, and that the responsibility should have been resting with the METI. Well, METI is responsible for stable supply of energy. That's correct. You said that you were fighting with a clock, so the planning was poor. But in summertime, we have a difficult time, and we try hard to save time, save electricity. when it comes to business establishments, they shortened the operations, and their profits was reduced, and some company have to fire some of their people working for their firm. This is actually the serious effect by the bad plan blackout or the saving energy efforts. Isn't METI liable in part for that? As you said, small and medium-sized companies and related industry establishments, as you said, under the METI's responsibility, pursue the energy saving, as you said correctly. What explanation did you receive from TEPCO as to the power supply in summertime? There was no opportunity whereby TEPCO directly gave explanation to me. And TEPCO and between TEPCO and Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, there was some discussion going on, and I was reported about the process of discussions. Chairman Katsumata appeared in this hearing. When it comes to the prospect of the power supply, actually, that has a bearing on every individual. So he mentioned that that should not be really unilaterally made by the TIPCO, but there was some coordination with the Agency of Natural Resources Agency. That's what Chairman Kasabata mentioned. Is it correct? I don't know whether it's what we call coordination or such, but at the time, to what extent electricity supply will be recovered in the south of Fukushima, there was a thermal power, and it was affected by tsunami and resulting in the serious damage. And there was serious effort to restore the facility, and whether they could be restored by summertime or not. And from time to time and from day to day, the supply situation was changing at the time. So at that juncture, there was a close communication between the agency and TEPCO. So that's how I was reported, and something I was aware of. So despite the fact that TEPCO had a prospect for power supply in summer at early stage, but did you know that they delay the announcement of prospective power supply by 1 month? Did you know about that? No. If that was true, actually, the agency knew about it. And the agency agreed that announcement be delayed by 1 month. Well, to postpone the announcement by 1 month, that's not something the agency would accept. And being asked why the announcement was delayed, Mr. Katsumata chairman said that the announcement is not something that only one utility could make a decision in terms of announcement. Well, I myself cannot really give you on this point because I'm not really fully aware of that situation. As I said earlier, in July or in August, there are different parameters and the speed with which the damaged facility be restored, how much electricity supply be restored in summertime. So parameters are changing. So I think that was why they delay. Currently, people are wondering whether the supply would be enough this summer or not. Well, actually, it's more than 1 year after the accident. And the agency did something to prepare for this situation, for this summer season. Since August and onward, what happened is something I'm not in a position to tell the story about it, but what I'm aware of, including the period I was responsible, the nuclear power plants will not be able to generate sufficient power. So how best we can assess the alternative energy resources, included the budgeting. So every possible countermeasures be considered, and those are the things we consider. So while you were serving as vice minister, what was your thinking? Other than Hamaoka, If the reactor units were commissioned, then restarted, then that should create the sufficient supply. Did you think that way? At the time, in terms of the supply situation in summer season, I was worrying about, I had concern over. But because of the seriousness of the accident at Fukushima, we thought that sufficient safety measure be taken. And also, we have to really acquire the consent from the local governments and people for the nuclear reactor to start again. So we were considering all possible measures. Weren't you making efforts to restart the reactors? For those that could be started again, and if that possible, in terms of demand and supply situation, that would create more power. Well, except Hamaoka, were you making efforts to have the other reactors start again? That's the direction of your effort, wasn't it? No, safety was everything. It was center of our consideration at the time. If the sufficient safety is confirmed, then the reactor that could be started again would be operated again, of course, subject to the consent of the local governments and people. So it was a contingent upon the agreement of the people and the governments of that area. As of June 18th, Mr. Kaeda actually made statement in a written form as to the start of operations of the nuclear power. And you are aware of that. Yes, I was aware that this statement was made. When you look into this statement, it says that so far METI instructed on March 30th implementation of emergency safety measure, assuming that all AC power supply was lost due to tsunami. There was instruction given to the operator. And there's no really serious problem with respect to the safety for continuations or restart of nuclear power plants. You know that, yes. It's slightly different from the NISA's idea, much more lukewarm idea. What was the background of that? I don't remember the details, but March 30th, even if AC power supply is lost, the measures, sufficient measures to be mentioned to avoid the damage of the core. I don't remember exactly, but also the plural, the security of plural external power sources, and also countermeasure against a severe accident were requested to the operators at the same times. So all those things be fulfilled before the starting of consideration of the restart of nuclear powers. Well, I'm asking about the restart of the nuclear powers. There are 30 related items, and out of which core 15 items called emergency safety measures that were requested to operators. And at the time, there was no such concept of stress emerging back then. And with respect to those 30 items, you requested the operators to submit the plan. And actually, at that time, the nuclear reactors could be started again with much smaller number of items. Well, I am aware of 30 items, if not details. I do not think that I have a full understanding of 30 items in detail. I'm not confident about that. The safety measure necessary for the start of nuclear reactor are different from the thought we held at the time. And this one plus stress test plus the countermeasures of the technical findings were the ideas of the government's idea at this moment. So some people said that even the current government requirement is not enough. But back then, the government already acquired the finding of the verification of accident. The verifications of accident effects were progressing in parallel in the government. Well, actually, the government investigation committee did not really report the outcome set at the time. What was the thought of the government at the time? The earthquake swayed the area, accompanied by tsunami, and the seawater pumps and AC power source were lost. Immediately after the earthquake, the scrum was triggered for actually the function was triggered normally to stop the nuclear reactor, but the cooling function was lost due to tsunami. That's how the situation was understood. But at this moment, you could explain the situation like that. But back then, there's confusion. So there's so many different thoughts. Some people might have thought severe accident actually caused the accident. Earthquake caused the accident. There are some voices in Japan believing that. And there are no really official report published then. And your vice minister, you told that the important matters were entrusted to NISA. But when this statement was made, did you have any detailed idea of your own about the situation? No. I myself didn't really a central role in drawing up this statement. Understood.
Well, I do think that the ministry was thinking about restarting the nuclear power plants. And was this idea in sync with Prime Minister Kan and others at that time? I don't have a recollection of speaking to the Prime Minister directly. However, from the end of April to the beginning of May, several times with the Prime Minister, there were occasions to speak with him. And then for the summit meeting in May, there was an energy policy presentation that needed to be given at the Deauville summit. So I think that that was the content of what we discussed. And within the 4 pillars, nuclear energy is one of those pillars. And after the 18th of June, the Prime Minister, I don't remember when it was, however, with Minister Kaeda regarding these thoughts, they were expressed. Basically speaking, I have the same thoughts he had said, I recollect. And on the 6th of May, Hamaoka stopped operations. And Vice Minister, you were partaking in this meeting, weren't you? No, not at that Hamaoka meeting time. So at the front line, you had the minister attending to the negotiations. As far as the Prime Minister was concerned and the discussions pertaining to Hamaoka, it was the minister and other concerned persons participating in this. Well, where was it? Which ministry did suggest Hamaoka, first of all? I don't recall this accurately. However, as METI, we had proposed this, I believe. Yes, that's correct. It was METI's proposal. And you, as Vice Minister, would not give a presentation with regard to that? At that time, in parallel, I don't remember whom it was at the Prime Minister's office residence. I was giving an explanation to a politician. And with regard to METI's scenario and nuclear power plants and the shutdown and the restart of those. Was there any gap that existed between the two? With regard to the shutdown of Hamaoka nuclear power plant, there would be some sort of strategy or something that would go along with that, I understand. And on the 18th of June, before this, on the 7th of June, within the government, there was the Energy Environment Conference, which took place. I don't remember the actual date, but I do understand there was such a meeting that took place. What sort of meeting was it? The Energy Environment Meeting Conference, based on the accident that had taken place. The new government policy would be put together with regard to energy-related matters. And as far as the ministry that needs to promote energy policy, which ministry would that be? METI would be the most important ministry. And for the Prime Minister to host this kind of meeting, did you not have an opinion as Vice Minister of your ministry? Within the government, there are very many ministries and agencies that deal with energy-related matters. The Prime Minister's office would come up with a unified policy, and there had been that sort of background. So therefore, it's not very unusual for this to happen. The government, based on this accident, had said that we needed to come up with a new energy policy, and Prime Minister Khan at that time had said that renewable energy could be utilized as a major pillar of energy resource. And this was mentioned at the summit as well. Why couldn't you have come up with a comprehensive investigatory conference or some kind of experts conference? There was no conference that looked at the overall energy strategy. However, I do believe that the experts did assemble and have a meeting around May or so. There was that huge accident that had taken place, and what needs to be done in terms of stable provisioning of energy, we needed to discuss that. So therefore, within the government, METI wanted to make a contribution and also make various considerations to make that happen. In that experts meeting and the direction it was trying to take, and Prime Minister Khan's energy promotion policy, were these consistent with one another? As far as the energy experts meeting was concerned, this was thought up by Minister Kaeda based on the premise that had crumbled. So there needed to be a comprehensive way of rethinking matters and start from scratch. And there were various discussions, very varied in nature, that were held. And the energy environment meeting and the discussions conducted there, they were consistent with one another, I do understand. As far as I understand, earlier there was a mention of Hamaoka's shutdown and the scenario with regard to that, as well as the Prime Minister's statement at the summit and the energy environment meeting and NISA's role and the stress test. As far as these matters are concerned, METI had different thoughts? I don't think that is necessarily the case. Whether or not the discussions were reflected upon and consistency sought out. I'm not entirely certain. However, I do feel that such efforts were undertaken. Various witnesses had testified already. It seems as if there were differences in opinion, more so. METI had been promoting its policy, and other matters were being raised which would try to change that direction. Perhaps there was resistance on the part of your ministry. That is one of the criticisms that are lobbied against us. I do believe that reform needed to take place in those areas that necessitate such reform to take place. And as far as the NISA was concerned, we wanted to sort things out and make this happen. And to think about what would be necessary, I do believe that was the flow of things. The accident had already happened. And as far as the provisioning of energy and energy conservation were concerned, the people had suffered greatly. If there had been conflict within the government, it could be said to be a man-made disaster if each of the ministries were pursuing their own interests. The administration could not continue in the manner that it had. Yes, exactly as you point out. However, as far as the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry trying to pursue its own interests, I do not think that was the case. I'd like to ask, earlier there was the issue of compensation, and this is one of the damages that needs to be looked at. What is your thinking, and what sort of proposals did you have with regard to compensation to those who were victimized by this accident? Very many people were detrimentally affected by this accident, and the compensation needs to take place as soon as possible, was the thinking, and it would be quite a huge amount in terms of the funding necessary. What sort of scheme ought to be set up? TEPCO needs to deal with it first of all, and TEPCO needs to come up with a scheme that would make it possible to provide the necessary compensation, we thought. Vice Minister's proposal and Ministry of Finance's proposal and METI's proposal, we understand this, but what was your proposal? I'm not sure what you're referring to when you say proposal. As far as my own personal proposal is concerned, at that time, I don't understand that there was something as such that had existed at that time. You are the person that is most responsible. You needed to come up with that proposal and come up with a very solid thinking as far as your ministry was concerned. I'm sure you can look at it in various ways. Depending upon the situation, we looked into this, and each of the sections responsible were thinking of their own proposals. I directed them to do so as well, I recall. As far as my own personal proposal is concerned, it's not as if they were taking their actions based on that. Within METI, it seems as if there were several conflicting proposals that existed at that time. I'm not sure what you mean by conflicting. However, this is a quite difficult policy issue. There were various objectives and purposes. We needed to prioritize those. There were differences in thoughts. However, I don't think you can go as far as saying it was a conflict. When you prioritize, what were the issues as far as your prioritization activities were concerned? I'm very sorry, I'm not sure about the details. There's no necessity to go into detail. If you could be very broad in your explanation, considerations such as this and that and the other were conflicting with one another, and we were seriously engaging ourselves in the work of trying to resolve those differences. If you could please refer to it as such. Compensation would take place through TEPCO. The compensation funds, how would those funds be secured? The country, to what extent would it be involved in that? Also, the scope of compensation, how would that be sorted out? The country, to what extent can it assume a burden? And to what extent would TEPCO take the responsibility? And there's also the relationship between compensation and the laws that exist pertaining to that.
The promotions of the electric supply is one of the important functions of METI. Wasn't that factor there in your mind? Of course, yes, that is the element to be considered fully. How did you consider? I don't understand your question. In the compensation scheme, the operators, the protect and development of the utilities, and is that factor included in your consideration in the process of the compensation scheme? Well, a compensation issue, it needs time to consider and implement. So in this case, TEPCO, bearer of the compensation, as a company, how the TEPCO as utility could exist and offer the compensation, at that point we thought was important. In the other ministries, there was another line of thought in the light of the objective of the respective ministries in building up their own proposal for compensation. Were there any ministries like that in formulating the compensation proposal? No, not that I recall at that juncture. For example, to place the issuance of the bonds for public placement could be one court. For example, insurance, the deposit insurance scheme, and the financing reconstruction law were the good precedents in the past. But were those also considered by METI? Well, on this particular case, we had consultation with the Ministry of Finance, MOF. Were there any confrontations or different opinions between MOF and METI? Well, the two are different ministries, so it was not really the case that two ministries have 100% opinions at the same time. Sometimes we have to reconcile. There are financial institutions which finance the TEPCO. In terms of the protection and development of financial institutions or stability of monetary system, from the perspective of those agencies and ministries in charge of those, were there any consideration given to the bond issuance or the proposal to cause the shareholders to be responsible? Were there any ministries and agencies which consider the compensation scheme in that light? When it comes to the effect on the fixed income market, yes, it was an element that had to be considered. But as you ask, when it comes to any agency or ministry who actually insisted the implications on the financial market, there was no such ministry who strongly insisted that. Well, actually, you said that you actually thought that NISA should handle the situation when it comes to the measures after the accident, when it comes to safety. But you were rather deeply involved in this conversation scheme or such, because you sounded very eloquent in answering. Well, the way I answer might left you with that impression, but at the time, the major mission in my mind was the recovery of the nuclear power accident, and the second largest mission, as you rightly say, was the energy supply, a stable supply of energy, and also the recovery and reconstructions of the affected areas. All those three actually shared the important missions. When it comes to compensation scheme, the expert team was set up within ministry. So in relation to this, as I mentioned, I think I actually rely on the activities done in expert meeting newly set up in the ministry. I would like to take a look at the other documents to prove that how you yourself, Vice Minister, was involved in the compensation scheme. Well, I would like to talk about pool thermal. Actually, in Fukushima Daiichi, there was a decision. The mixed oxide fuel was utilized for number 3 unit. And at the time of introduction of MOX fuel, what was the position or what was the idea Vice Minister held at the time? In terms of the timing of the introduction of mixed oxide fuel, I don't remember the timing exactly, but it, I think it was 2010 around. Well, and I became Vice Minister at it was August in 2010 that the MOX fuel was introduced. So it was immediately after you assumed the Vice Ministership. As the Vice Minister, I don't recall that I heard the MOX oxide one. But anyway, when the pool thermal was introduced, putting aside what person played what role, actually, the permit by the governor was given in August after he became a vice minister, and he started operation in October, soon after you became vice minister. So you were not really that interested in this event, were you? No, it's not the case that I was not interested. When I was in NISA as well, when it comes to plutonium thermal type nuclear reactor, there were discussions. And after I assumed the position, I think this discussions on plutonium thermal type nuclear reactor discussion was gone because of the scandal of hiding the problem by TEPCO. Well, when it comes to the plutonium thermal type that uses the plutonium with a longer half-life to be utilized, so there was some concern in the minds of people around that area. And so they thought that safety should be confirmed first before it introduced a plutonium thermal type. For the anti-seismic safety assessment, the back check should be done. And that was a request particularly made by the governor of the site. But as you are aware of, other than interim report, there is a final report. But at the time of interim report, there was no really the provisions on the evaluation assessment of tsunami, verifications of the capability to withstand a tsunami, and how the site could be improved to withstand tsunami. That point was not really taken up at the time of interim report was issued. After that report was issued, the host area actually started to introduce the plutonium thermal type nuclear reactors. So, in hindsight, the host area requested to do the anti-seismic safety assessment back check, and it should have been a much more stronger request by NISA such to do the back check. Then the consequences of tsunami could have been different. What do you think about this line of idea? Sorry, I don't necessarily grasp the whole situations. What happened at the time between NISA and the local government, Fukushima prefecture, governor and heads of municipalities in Fukushima. What discussions actually took place and what ended up in the introduction of plutonium thermal type? Unless I actually understand what happened, actually, I think I can't really give you my statement. Well, I'll change my question. There's a special subsidy given for plutonium thermal nuclear reactor. It might have been there, but I'm not fully aware of that. There's a special transfer of subsidies for plutonium thermal nuclear reactor. And vis-a-vis governor of the prefecture, the Agency of Natural Resources and Energy actually said that they will again reintroduce the special subsidy for introductions of plutonium thermal type nuclear reactor. Actually, there was a special transfer, but it was suspended because this idea went back a long time ago. So it started with the subsidy, and it was suspended. And again, for the resurgence of the discussions on the plutonium thermal power, the agency said that they will revive the idea of special transfer. Actually, from the agency, the explanation was given to us to the extent that the agency explained to us by the end of July 2010, if the prefecture agreed with the introduction, then the 3 billion yen transfer would be given, and after that, that transfer will be reduced by 500 million yen per fiscal year. What is this about? Well, I don't understand the intent of that one. As a bureaucrat, well, if the, I think it includes the wish for early approval from the government, local government. Well, actually, this is a system that the government will give the higher transfer money when the agreement was made from the local government. Well, actually, the local government requested the back check to be conducted expeditiously, but it would take a long time. And on the one side, there's an idea, just wait for the outcome of that back check. But on the other hand, there's another thought that if you don't agree with the introduction, then we'll give you less transfer money, and the money will be reduced each year. So, as a bureaucrat, would you please explain the justification of this system of the special transfer? Well, I am not aware. I'm not aware of the details. Actually, this is the issue related to the budget. So maybe how the agency made a budget proposal, there could have been a lot of things as a background. So, well, you're talking about only 3 sentences description. So you asked me to give my evaluation, but I think I can't give you a learned evaluation. Well, the transfer money will reduce the later the local governments will give. Well, that could be the intent, but at the beginning you said that shown, if the people are shown with this, it is a strong incentive for the early agreement by the prefecture government to agree with the proposal. So on time horizon, well, the local government wanted to secure the safety of the plutonium thermal, and on the other hand, you said just accept early will give you more money. It sounds a contradictory approach. Well, I don't know the details. It's whether it could be an incentive for the local government to agree with the thermal as soon as possible. I think if unless otherwise the money will reduce. If that's a true intent, I think it's not really the right approach. We have the documentation by the Agency of Natural Resources and Energy. So would you please take a look at this document? Yeah, this is the report on the meeting with the governor of the local government, the prefecture, with the representative from the agency. Would you please take a look?
If you look at this material, 2010, on the 29th of March, vis-a-vis the Fukushima governor, it says, the wording that is here on the screen is being distributed at that meeting as an explanatory document. Do you understand that? Yes. Looking at this document, do you have any opinions to express? As far as this special subsidy for blue thermal is concerned, and the amount of the budget for that, it's written in a very summarized manner. The significance of this system, together with the local government, whether or not there was an agreement between them and the Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, is questionable. I understand. I'd like to ask you, as far as the anti-seismic back check is concerned, not just in the interim report, but there ought to have been a tsunami countermeasures in place if this could have been finalized, and to reinforce the structures to be able to withstand the tsunami should it occur. And after the final confirmation is made with regard to tsunamis, there are things that can be done in the order of priority, I do believe. Chairman Katsumata of TEPCO had talked about when a tsunami occurs to make certain that electric power would not be lost and the power source position could be changed from what it was. This wouldn't take very much time or money, he had mentioned. Don't you think that such an opportunity was not made use of? I'm going to be repeating something. I do apologize, speaking in general terms. As far as the anti-seismic back check is concerned, this was not something that could be done slowly, but needed to be done very swiftly. I understand. I'd like to ask about another point. And I'd like to ask, when you were in the position of the chair of the NISA, B5B was an issue at that time, wasn't it? As far as that term is concerned, I heard about it after the accident had occurred. Whether or not I have a recollection as the person within NISA, I'm not sure. In the United States, 9/11 occurred, and there was a overall effort to come up with countermeasures to fortify possible sites of attack. And at that time, if the B5B countermeasures could have been put into place, then this accident could have been avoided altogether, many people say now. When you were at NISA, the United States required such B5B. To adopt this in Japan, if when you were in your position at NISA, if this was done, then this accident could have been avoided. Regarding anti-terrorist measures and protection of nuclear materials, I myself, as well as other members of NISA, had a very strong interest at that time. And there was a new law that was going to be put together with regard to the protection of nuclear materials. The United States was far advanced in terms of this, in putting that law together. Missions were sent to study up on the issue. As far as B5B is concerned, this wasn't something that came to me in my position at NISA, but this was an effort as it pertained to anti-terrorist countermeasures. The United States viewpoint was not something that was fully disclosed, I feel. The United States sites put together huge budgets in order to work on the vent facilities and other portions and equipment. Whether you know about B5B, you didn't make a confirmation as to why the United States was doing all this. I was not concerning myself very much with that information. The organization I referred to earlier, INDA, the NRC top-level leader came and we had our discussions over 2 days, and I don't feel that we had a discussion regarding that. We're not listening to you speak as the Vice Minister, but we're listening to you speak as a representative of NISA to come up with the safety standards necessary and to further raise the safety level of those facilities. The United States sites are being further reinforced. The electric power company people already realized this. Many people went to see this for themselves and heard about it, and that you were not aware of this didn't have to do with how you didn't receive the reports, but rather that you were avoiding becoming cognizant of this matter. It could have been the case. I did not deal directly with this information. If B5B would have been adopted, this accident could have been avoided. Do you feel that way as well? At this point in time, with B5B, what sort of countermeasures could have been put together? I'm not aware of the up-to-date knowledge regarding that. So it's very difficult for me to answer that question accurately. I'd like to ask one final question, if I may. We've had NISA representatives come and testify thus far. We've had, of course, Mr. Terasaka, who was Director General of NISA, come and testify as well. And there wasn't enough technical knowledge that he had, and therefore he left someone at the Prime Minister's office and residence who had more knowledge. And Mr. Fukano talked about the international standards of IAEA and how he is not in a position to even explain this to the people. So as far as the selection of the top-level leaders of NISA, who is doing that? That is based on the human resources policy of NISA, and that is something that is handled by the vice minister, we were told. Is that correct? It's the same for every ministry, including METI, regarding the top-level director generals and such. It would be the minister who would decide whom would be selected for those top-level positions. If we are asked for our opinions and advice, then this would include vice ministers and others who are concerned with human resources to provide advice and suggestions. We understand this as well. In the past, there used to be papers that would be put on the wall, and people would be allocated positions, and depending upon the situation, some of them would even be sent to other organizations outside. It's not the minister who does this kind of detailed work, is it, first and foremost? That work is done by others, and then you look at it as vice minister and then pass it on to the minister. Is that not true? I'd like not to comment about how human resources are selected. If we are asked for our opinions and comments, we do speak to the minister. Up until now, in METI, when you think about the Director General of NISA and the selection of that person, whether it was appropriate or not, is being questioned. There's a lot of people who have graduated from humanities faculties and don't have the sufficient knowledge regarding nuclear energy and industrial safety. There's been criticism that have been directed toward NISA. And what do you think of these criticisms as vice minister? I too, if I'm asked whether I am a technical expert or an administrative expert, I don't feel that, therefore, that disqualifies me from being in the position of vice minister. We obtain information and knowledge from around the world. And the organization overall further hones its technical expertise based on what we continue to learn. And what sort of leadership can be exercised? This needs to be judged in an overall manner. Just because someone has a background in humanities does not mean that person is not an appropriate person for the position of Director General, NISA, or other positions. Well, in the testimony, I had also heard from the Director General that he didn't feel that he was inappropriate. But as far as B5B, if he didn't understand this, perhaps he would not have been the appropriate person. And what about yourself? Perhaps you would not be the appropriate person to deal with these matters if you are not aware of B5B at that time. This sort of accident had happened, and I am not speaking here full of confidence, and I do not want to give the impression. I feel very strongly that we need to continue to hone our knowledge, expertise, and skills. And as far as B5B is concerned, for that to be raised as the point in making a point that I was not an appropriate person, I wonder about that. that accident could have been avoided. The experts in the power companies are saying that. So therefore, we'd like to have you feel more of a responsibility in terms of this. There's been all kinds of reasons as to why perhaps you have not been able to obtain the information because it was more terrorism related. And maybe the information could not have been provided. You may say that we're focusing just on this, but there's been a lot of damage sustained and suffering that many people have undergone and are still undergoing. If you did know about this in some way, that it could have been avoided, you knew about this, but at that time it was very difficult to do.
I understood what you meant to say. So in that particular context, as I said earlier, the overseas findings, what things are done, I think constantly the efforts been made to catch new findings overseas. But when it comes to the anti-terrorist measure, we had very close consultation with the NRC to prepare the bill for the nuclear physical protection. There's one thing I would like to ask you. In terms of the collection of information, well, we were talking about B5B in nuclear power plants, but it is very important to gather information, what's happening in the developed countries. And, well, there are numbers of the Foreign Assembly in here, and with the nuclear attaché, and we have foreign services in other countries. The people, the staff of NISA, could have some post in the Japanese embassies and other countries. Are there any system existing here that people from the NISA could station in the Japanese embassies overseas? Japan, UK, and USA. I'm not saying that not all the assembly there, but there's a genus established and as an organization, and I think that organization is working as a organ to collect information. The other possibilities, IAEA and NAIIC, and OECD framework. Around the time I made efforts to secure the post in those international organizations. Generally speaking, there's a science attaché covering a quite broad area of science already there in the post. The scientific attaché is not really restricted to the nuclear power plant. In the actually, that will involve the MEXT, Ministry of Education, Culture, Sport, Science and Technology. So between MEXT and METI, how important it is to gather information, therefore securing the post in other countries. Have you ever negotiated between the two ministries to secure the post for information gathering? Yes, I remember. With the people in charge of nuclear power plants in MEXT, I remember that there were efforts to exchange information and to exchange the people between the two ministries, including in and outside Japan. I remember there are several discussions because of the long history of the nuclear administration. There are two streams. One is METI and the other is MEXT. I think there are two dimensions in the administration of the nuclear power plants, and that is one of the points of reflections or criticism someone made because of the huge, serious accident we experienced. when we try to trace back the causes of the problem, that could be the one of the possible causes. You, Vice Minister, have a rich experience, but what opinion or perspective do you have in terms of the dual two ministries involved in the administration of nuclear power plants? Whatever the regulatory structure be envisioned in the future, it boils down to the people. When I was in NISA, how best we can do to develop the experts was a major concern at the time, as you stated. For example, the agency of Science and Technology Agency or METI. It is a quite great waste. We have to really think about which belongs to which, and there's a strong, so to say, discontinuity between the two. That's a waste. I think we really have to think about the development experts. Whether educational background is science or humanity, you have said that people can discharge their functions appropriately. Having listened to your answers, not only B5B, but in general, I thought if the things the people had been more sensitive to new findings, the situation would have been different. Chairman Kazumata mentioned if there had been no tsunami, but even if that applies, one parcel's loss and all the other parcels will be lost. And as long as you have a keen sense of emergency and risk, the people could function regardless of which ministry something belongs to. How to develop the best people is very important. Do you think recalling yourself as the person developed properly to be an expert, or what kind of things do you think that to be improved to develop the right people for the right function? What I try to develop people rather than the old people, but the young people. I think the top of the organization, how to develop the qualified top people is important. To be exposed to the broad array of experience is very important. Whatever the management post or not really confined to the meeting room, office room in Japan, but all those issues have international relevance. So people should develop the network overseas to have the conscious efforts to widen the scope of the new findings would be important. I think what you said applies to any discipline. What about the system already established in Japan, or do you have any framework to enable you to do that? When I was in NISA, we called they created some mark to identify the people, prospective people to develop their career. There are kind of efforts, attempts to develop, to identify, select the people for the future development. Mr. Tanaka, Coach Tanaka, the other Tanaka of the committee member, we have two Tanakas in the committee, a completely different perspective or angle. I would like to raise question as to the future of Japan. The METI is the ministry for the development of Japanese economy and industry for the wealth of the people of Japan. And the renewable energy or natural energy, development renewable energy is sought after as a country, wave, geothermal, wave, and solar. All those renewable energy be developed, and that is also cited in the comprehensive energy policy in the cabinet. Well, even without the country, the central government description, we all believe that the direction is important. I did some survey in the past several years. I think it includes METI, and we have a certain figure of MEX. But when it comes to METI alone, in the several years, more than 100 billion yen was budgeted for nuclear power generation. And when it comes to the renewable energy or natural energy, if you do know the number, would you please tell me the budget for the development of the renewable energy or natural energy? I do not have a number on hand. Would you please let us know later? Yes, I will let you know later. Well, I think there are so many questions we would like to pursue, but I actually say the following. You will serve as the general director of the agency and NISA, and also you serve as a deputy vice minister or vice minister at the minister secretariat and METI vice minister, including nuclear power regulations, energy, and you held so important positions on energy. And in 2010, you became the top of the METI vice minister, and 1 year later, the accident happened. Having listened to your statement, and what you did at the first position, when asked what you did in each position, you said you were not aware of and you were not reported. But I think you are a kind of person easy to forget thing. And also B5P, what's happening in the B5P, you said you were not aware of or you didn't know. But you could have asked the person in charge. And mixed oxide fuel, there are so many things that you didn't forget. And how about back check? And all those questions that you said you were not aware of or you don't remember. And you were not reported. But this hearing could be viewed on the web, and English interpretation is provided. But you're the top people, the career person in each position. But I was amazed how easily you forget everything. And your statement might give the viewers an impression, well, wow, that's the Japanese government. Actually, whatever you said could affect the perception of the people toward Japan. And people overseas used to say Japan science and technology is excellence, but when we talk about governance or the top government official in charge of those areas, saying don't know, not reported, but you could have asked the people in charge in detail, but it could give a quite degrading perspective to the viewers. Well, we understand access was serious. There was at the major disaster, we understand how difficult it was to collect information in ECR, and NISA was not really functioning as secretariat. And actually, in order to speed up the process, did you do anything? Of course, there's so many things that wouldn't enable you to do, but what did you do to speed up the process? The chair, Furukawa, Mr. Furukawa, said something very critical about my competency. No, that's not the only thing I wanted to say. For one thing, there was natural disasters, major, serious difficulty to the country. And unless METI discharge the proper function, Japan will no longer exist. That was a kind of sense of the emergency I had at the time. There were so many problems. But after that, how we can settle the situation at the plan, and then to the security of power supply and plan blackout. And also the kerosene and gas were not available in the affected area. How best we could do to supply those to the affected area. So many, a myriad of things we had to work and handle. And METI actually sat on the core of those difficulties. And we encourage the people at METI and their disarray of the competency of the functions of METI. So we actually send people to the area relatively, we thought, weak at the METI. So we try to offset the weaknesses by sending people. But from the viewpoint of METI, after people join the METI, actually there is a certain career path by seniority, so people are promoted by seniority. So you, Mr. Matsunaga, you are the kind of success, image of success for the young people working at METI. And actually, by the way you behave at the time of accident, did you act to give the source of inspiration to the younger people? And no matter how system or training you give, that the people could not be developed unless you really see their senior actually acted in particular way to inspire the people enough. So this major incident actually reveal the fact that how the government is functions and the drawbacks of the activities. You said the governing or governance at the government. So because of very brilliant career, if you had instructed properly, I think a situation would have been transpired differently. So that's the kind of observation I got. And anyway, Mr. Matsunaga, sorry that we extended our hearing session, but it's time to adjourn the commission meeting. Thank you very much for appearing. Sorry that we lose courtesy in asking questions. Thank you very much for appearing in hearing. Thank you.
で、次回の委員会ですが、
Our next meeting will be held tomorrow on the 17th. The Minister of METI, Mr. Baeda Kaeda, will appear as the unsworn witness tomorrow. Then today's commission's meeting be adjourned. Thank you.